Welcome to YouTube, where you get to look behind the scenes on my builds, where I take you through the techniques, the ideas, all the details you might want to know if you are really into Lego. Instead of a photograph, you get the details of what's going through my head so you can learn and be better. And the first thing I've noticed is, well, first of all, this is a Tensergy, Tencentury, 10, it's got tensile stuff going on. Everybody's going crazy over these tension sculptures where the center of mass is always pulled way forward. So this, you can think of this as always wanting to tip. So if you pin something here, it's naturally going to want to fall. And these longer chains in the back, even though they appear to be holding it up, what's really happening is it's using the pull motion vector along this line and keeping it from falling over. Okay, so yeah, it's a great almost physics mechanical illusion. It looks great if you kind of bonk stuff a little bit, not too much. It'll wobble before it retains its balance again. It's just a great idea. You can think of the weight being suspended off of this, so that something is held in place along this axis. It wants to tilt forward and tip forward, but it can't because there's something here keeping it. And it's a great illusion. Everybody's going crazy over this stuff. But for me, let's talk a little bit about the story. I've always wanted to make a sculpture for my builds where it would first honor the past. I'm really into space, and you know that. And second of all, show that it's been a long time, and in this case, weathered marble or weathered rock. So, intentionally trying to show things in a destructive sort of way that would lead someone to believe that it's been weakened even further, making the illusion even more complete, even more magical, because I'm all about magical stuff occurring. So one thing is I've seen this part attached to a base for stability, and I wanted to put it on a column. Uh, Not completely classical, but a classical column with, and then, so white for marble main color. Try to do a monochrome build. Add some of that trans neon green glow. Add gold, because I love metallics and I love translucent pieces, so that was always going to be part of the build. And yeah, as far as the color styling, that's what I was thinking of. But then coming in and intentionally taking what would be a great sculpture and moving in these slope pieces to make it look like chunks have eroded out or fallen out over time. And I'm sorry, my OCD, not OCD, sorry, my attention to detail makes me want to straighten those out. So starting with a column, there is an axle in here supporting it, otherwise it would fall over. This model is not even what I'd call a model level of sophistication. It is definitely photograph only. The only way, it fell over about 4 or 5 times while I was taking pictures. It's so touchy that it will work only for a photograph. So I have to admit, there are little teeny touches of Craggle in this to make sure it can make it to a show. But I can assure you, whenever I build a model, I use no Craggle in order to make sure it's a legitimate build. But when I'm going to use this as a display piece, there are times where I am forced to do the master builder thing and Craggle things in. You can see the evil Craggle is right over there. So for tonight's video, I went ahead and touched 4 pieces in different places to kind of firm up what would normally break apart if I do anything more than just give it a sideways glance. But the overall idea was to keep it as thin as possible, as airy as possible. You can see that it's slightly leaning forward right now. That's just the nature of this build. Yeah, let me think. Let me go into kind of how I built it. So started with the base, intentionally destroyed or removed pieces to give it that weathered look. And as I go around, you'll notice that it's asymmetric. I always wanted to kind of uh, take my own style on things. So using curves, a lot of my work has curves, but using a lot of slope pieces and arches to make this work. Intentionally doing things like the scroll work in there and inset, using the cylinder pieces with the ridges, gives it a nice maybe Greco-Roman, Greek kind of look to it, classical style. I always wanted flags or banners, and once again, my attention to detail is getting the better of me after this has fallen so many times. Just moving that back into place. So starting that out, I really like the idea of when I move these in to have it visually counterweight the arch, having it split off, moving things backwards through the use of a macaroni I thought was a more elegant look, and then sloping it forwards. And of course, I'm going to work my vintage piece usage into there. Classic Space, this is an original Classic Space brick with the weathered molding. It was also fun to get in and try to find the nastiest, most beat up bricks that I have and finally put them to use. Coming up, a bit of an inset. This entire area right in here, this one plate, 2 by, I'm guessing 8 plate, is what's structurally holding everything together. Everything else is just detailing on top. So I intentionally weathered it back to show that maybe it was beefier and really strong back in the day, but the test of time has worn it down. Coming into slopes, leaving exposed studs to show that it was finished at one point. I like to be asymmetric to give it that visual appeal. And then using arches to once again thin it down as much as possible to give that illusion of fragility, which of course the model has, but to give the actual illusion of fragility to the whole model. Coming out, more weathering, more things, getting weathered over the sands of time. And then my showpiece is this sculpture that I've wanted to do for a while, not a while, maybe a month. So in case you didn't know, I have the moon landing set, really, really old original set commemorating the moon landing. It had brick built figures, much like this guy. And this is before there were minifigs even invented. So the visor of the helmet is there. There's weathering on the back, but really building that character up. And this original pre-fig person is holding up the next generation of minifigs when they were first invented. So this person represents the police officer, which we all know so well, before the final minifigs and Classic Space shout out all in white, with some original equipment looking off into the future with an element that's very hard to find, hasn't really been made in such a long time. And then to show the wearing down of time, I used an official element. The idea was at one point this was going around, and then coming up with the telescope, a clip and a bar at a side. The telescope again, but with a new type of quarter round tile on top, or the jumper stud to give that illusion, like over here, that this railing has been there but has since worn away and fallen over. And the inkwell piece, of course, looking like a broken off snapped version of that. Mixing it up, another inkwell back there. So constantly working with this idea that the marble statue, the marble has worn away. You can see where there's a visible crack in the body. In fact, there's only one element holding up this entire thing. It's right in there. It's a 2 by 1 solid brick, and the rest of this is cheese slopes and things intentionally removed to where it rests on that little corner of the cheese slope. But enhancing the fragility of the overall build. Pulling this off really took some patience and not build time as much as photography instead of time. So let me rotate this. Yeah, you can see where he's looking toward the future. This guy's hanging out. Let's keep moving this. There's more weathering in there. You can see where I'm using a cheese slope and a one plate offset to bring in the negative slope to give that illusion of a chisel. And yes, this makes it more fragile as you build. It takes a lot more time. There's more effective weathering there. Coming around. There's also one by one round studs, lifting this out so the chain doesn't hit the side. But yes, I use Technic there and there. It's a great technique. There. As you can see, come on. There you go. Coming down and just toying with that idea of, marble's not permanent. It's a very soft stone. You really should use Wisconsin, let's say Wassa red granite. That's I forget the technical name where I grew up. That stuff is so tough. The only way they can polish it is by rubbing two slabs against each other. There's no tool that really will do it justice. But yeah, you can see in here where it's just things have fallen apart in disrepair. And to show something lying on the ground, I just put a clip element at an angle, and then open-ended one by one stud plates to show that everything broke apart from the back end. And then the backpack of the Intrepid Apollo astronaut has been worn away as well. Oh, see? Sneeze and it falls. Sneeze and it falls. Well, there it went. There's nothing really more to record at this point. I hope you saw enough to know that this was fun while it lasted. Bye.